Hi, I'm Khosravi, Managing Attorney of the JQK Immigration Law Firm. Today I want to discuss the 8 steps to choosing an immigration attorney. You know, when you have an immigration issue, it's a very stressful process. There's a lot of unknowns and confusion, especially under the current government, that makes the process very difficult. So it's important to have good counsel to guide you through the process. But how do you find someone that you can rely upon? We're going to go through that today and a lot more. Hopefully this information can help you make the best decision for your immigration case. Thank you so much for tuning in and viewing this video. I think it's very important that you go over this and know this knowledge before you make the decision to choose an immigration lawyer. An immigration lawyer is like a doctor. The future of your life in the United States hinges on good representation, so you know the proper things to do in the future. And immigration law is very hard and complicated. Even for the best lawyers, it's hard to keep up on it and know what the newest rules are because they change so rapidly. It'll be hard enough for you to do it on your own, but with good counsel, it'll be difficult enough too. But as long as you have a counsel that's dedicated, an attorney that pays attention and cares about you, it could work out. Now, traditionally, people find an immigration lawyer by simply either looking in the yellow pages at a directory with just names and phone numbers, or they ask a friend if they know someone. However, these methods are not reliable. You have no way to know who the person is and have a total perspective of their work, their efforts, what kind of reviews and what kind of references they have. So it's a difficult way to choose a lawyer. It's kind of like shooting in the dark. You don't know what you're going to hit. So what I would do, and the way I always think about it, is how would I choose a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, being a person in this field, so I can help you do the same thing based on the same ways. Now, what I'm about to go through is the online method of choosing an immigration lawyer. Now, there are many immigration lawyers who have no online presence. You can't even find them on the internet, and they're wonderful. However, you can't find them, so what difference does that make? This is about helping you find the attorney that's available and has a presence on the internet, and is a step-by-step guide to doing that. So let's start right away. So the first thing you need to do when you have an immigration case and you need an immigration attorney is to study the case on your own. You should have a working understanding of what issues you have. And there are a lot of resources online by video, blogs, podcasts that you listen to and spend some time on to better understand the situation that you're dealing with. Now, you have to be careful. A lot of the information online is either incorrect or outdated, especially as I mentioned earlier, because the immigration laws change so rapidly, especially under President Trump's administration. So you can expect things to rapidly change, but you should have an idea of what the mistakes are, what the issues are, and generally what you need to do before moving forward, because that'll help you judge whether the attorney you're speaking with even knows what they're talking about. So you really need to be your own counselor, first of all, and protect yourself by getting the best understanding possible of the immigration system that you're going to be dealing with. So once you have a better idea of the case needs that you have, you should start going online and looking at attorney directories. There's many directories that list a lot of different lawyers, and the top ones are called avvo.com. There's also Yelp, YELP.com, and Google itself has search listings. And you should look for an immigration lawyer, and preferably one that is in your local area. Now let's talk about searching for a local attorney, someone that's in your area. It's not always required the immigration attorney that be local. If you have a court hearing or something that requires constant in-person interaction, then yes, having someone local is fine. However, in many of the types of cases that I handle, most or all the work is done by emailing the government stuff, uploading documents to them, or just sending letters to them. For example, if I'm dealing with the U.S. Embassy for something called consular processing, everything I do is mailed to the government or uploaded to them. So an in-person interaction is not needed with the government or with the client, and we do everything by video or by mail or email or phone. So you got to see if your case, for example, is a court case that requires you to attend a hearing. Well, those kind of cases, you want to have a local attorney that's familiar with the procedures of that local court. So that becomes very important. But again, as I mentioned, if you're dealing with the embassies, you might want to try to find a lawyer that's dealt with those embassies before, or the people that go to that country or embassy, that nationality, they may be more familiar with the nuances of that case. But overall, you try to go to these directories, search for an immigration attorney, maybe local, maybe not, depending on the type of case, and find which ones have the best reviews. As simple as that, is probably something you would have done anyway. So that's the first step. And when you're going through those, you really want to narrow your search down to 5 attorneys. Now, I say 5, and I wish people would consult with 5 different immigration attorneys before they make a final decision. It's very hard, it's very time consuming. Frankly, it's very annoying sitting through 5 different consultations, but you get the best perspective of what's going on and the differences in these attorneys and how much confidence you can have in each by seeing multiple people and see how they handle themselves, what kind of answers they give. Unfortunately, if you do talk to 5 different attorneys, you will probably get 5 different answers. And that's the problem with immigration law. It's very complicated and everyone has different experiences and different levels of knowledge on the case. You typically will hear different answers, or maybe you'll have answers that are very similar but diverge in strategy every time you talk to a different attorney. So we'll talk more about how to deal with that at the end of this, but that's why it's very important to talk to different people to see what they say, how they compare, and to be able to judge the differences to your benefit. However, most likely, most people usually go with the first immigration attorney they talk with. At most, they'll talk to 3 people. Well, that's not too bad. At least get 3 in there. I would strongly recommend that, if not 5. Now, when you're judging these people, as I said, go through their reviews. If they have high reviews, that's something good to look at. Now, you may run into people that don't have too many reviews, especially where you're looking at. Having some reviews is good to show that there's a constant interaction, new reviews, that they're still working and active in the field. But if they have bad reviews, it's not always bad. A lot of times there are people that leave reviews for no reason. I've seen reviews of colleagues where the person was not even their client, or maybe it was a competitor that wanted to hurt them. So not all reviews are bad, but look to see how that person responded to that review and get a total picture of their work to see if that is really verified or if it really represents the total type of work that they do. The third step in this is to help both narrow it down, and once you have it narrowed down to 5 people to pick the best ones in your total decision, is to research each individual. So the first thing you want to do is to find out if they're really an attorney, and you can check that out by checking the local bar association's website to see if their name pops up on there. For example, I'm a California bar attorney, and if you go to a website called CalBar, CALBAR.org, you'll be able to look up different attorneys, and first of all, you'll see if I am an attorney or the lawyer is an attorney, and second of all, you'll see if there's any disciplinary actions against them. Have they done things that are wrong? Now, again, sometimes people have disciplinary actions that aren't that bad, or they're mistakes, but they have to go through it. You have to really read the disciplinary decision to see if it's something that's terrible or not. It's not a good thing, obviously, having that, but it's very important to check it out. Secondly, you want to look to see if that person practices immigration law, if not exclusively, primarily. Immigration law is so complicated that if you are doing myriad of things, multiple things like bankruptcy law, family law, and immigration law, I can tell you that person is not going to be a good immigration lawyer. It's just too complicated, not only to just know immigration law, but within the several branches of immigration law, each one is more and more complicated. So to really know what you're doing, you really have to focus on that, and at most touch one other branch of law. So maybe you do immigration law and criminal law because there's overlaps. Maybe you do immigration law and family law because there are overlaps, or immigration law and certain business types of law that overlap. But to really just do more than that, it's something that I wouldn't trust an immigration lawyer, because it's just too complicated to know it all unless they've practiced many years and their expertise is so vast that they could handle more than that. But that's not many lawyers that could do that. Another thing to look at is how long they've been practicing. Now, if someone's a new practitioner, it's not necessarily bad. They can still be good. But ideally, you want to have someone who's been doing it for a couple of years to make sure they've had experience, they've done things before, they know how to even treat a client and have good customer service. But again, just someone being new is not necessarily a bad thing, but preferably you want someone that has experience, in particular the type of case that you're dealing with. So that's something you can mention when you're scheduling a consultation, when you're talking with them, and see if they have that particular kind of experience that you need. The next thing is to really look at their bio page. You usually go to their website, they'll have a biography, and there's a lot of information you can get from that. Not everyone's going to have this, but I think that's important. One thing is to see if they're a speaker, if they talk about immigration law frequently, especially on panels at professional organizations. The reason why I say that is to be on a panel to talk to other immigration attorneys about your expertise, about your knowledge in immigration law. You really have to prepare a lot, because you're going to be talking, or for example, when I go to panels and I talk to other immigration lawyers about my expertise areas, I have to make sure that I'm not making mistakes there, because it's going to look really bad, because those people will know if I'm making a mistake. So I have to study it hard, and just the process of preparing to speak in front of other people about the law requires me to study it even more than I normally would just for a case. That really helps with expertise, and it's a positive thing to look at when you're judging someone to be your immigration lawyer. Another thing is, are they members of professional organizations that are related to immigration law? The primary one is the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, or commonly known as AILA. And the point of AILA is to have a group, a trade association where you share a lot of information. Now, membership in it just costs money. There's no higher way of getting it or specialized way. So just by being a member, it's not that much, but having membership is good because AILA provides a lot of daily information, And whether your attorney actually reads that daily information or not, we don't know. But it also provides platforms and groups for you to talk with other people, conferences to go to. So there's more of a chance that that lawyer takes the time to get involved in their practice, into the field of immigration law, talk with others about it. So it's a positive indicator that they're active and they're caring about the law enough to continually study it and to get to know it. The next thing is, have they won awards in this area? So many lawyers will talk about winning awards, and so you have to be careful about this. Originally, there were a few companies that would announce awards for best immigration lawyers, and they don't necessarily do the best job at choosing people, but they weren't too bad. However, soon after, many companies got involved and realized it's a great way to make a lot of money. So a lot of these awards that exist, people get just essentially for paying. These companies send out the award notices to everybody, and whoever pays the money gets a plaque. Now, there are some awards like Super Lawyers and by Reuters and U.S. News's Best Lawyers, which I've seen really highlight really great colleagues in the field. In full disclosure, I'm on those lists as well. But I found the colleagues that are placed on that are really top-notch people, and I could vouch for them being great attorneys as well. So that list is great, but a lot of other ones miss the mark, and I wouldn't rely on those. The next thing to look at is, do they have products they can see of their work? Do they have writings? Do they have blogs? Do they do videos? And video is great because you can watch them and see their personality and how comfortable they are with the knowledge that they're talking about and just how they carry themselves. You might have two great immigration attorneys that can work with you, but if you talk to two of them, one of them might feel more comfortable, more closer that you can deal with than the other person. And video helps you make that decision beforehand to see, is this the kind of person that I'm comfortable with talking about? Because immigration does require you to reveal everything about yourself when it comes to finances. If you're getting married, very personal, intimate details of your lives, your past history, relationship with family members, education, and criminal history. There's a lot of personal information the U.S. government may ask of you, so your immigration lawyer has to ask as well. So you got to think, does this person look like I'm be comfortable sharing that information with them or not? And that's a big part of it. And as I'll talk about at the end, the last step is and I'll just jump forward and tell you a little bit earlier, is you have to trust your instincts on this. And that's why, human beings, when we see people, it really helps us judge better. Sometimes it leads to prejudice, but nonetheless, if you talk and communicate, your gut, your instincts will help you a lot in making that decision. Now, another thing to look at is, do they teach immigration law? And that kind of goes to panels, or if they're teaching at universities, at graduate schools, at law schools about immigration law, and that really helps because when you go and teach something, it forces you to learn it better, just like when I talked about being on panels and speaking at trade associations. Now, one question that I get asked sometimes by people in emails is, can you provide references? Can you give us the phone numbers of previous clients to call so we could check on you? Now, that's an awkward question to ask because the relationship I have with all my clients is confidential. And so I can't just tell people who they are. Now, even if I had a client that was so nice and would let me do that, I just can't keep giving people's phone numbers out to them so they can call them out of the blue and ask very personal questions. So I don't think that's a good question to ask about people you can call, but that's what the whole point of reviews are. So when you go online on Google, on Avvo, on Yelp, and all these different websites, people leave reviews and you can make that judgment right there. Now, sometimes these reviews are fake, so you really got to read them to get a better feeling to see if these are fake reviews by friends or if it comes off as real people. And finally, do they speak your language? Now, one thing I find really important, and not all colleagues agree, is that you be able to speak with your attorney directly. Sometimes a translator may be needed. However, I'm very cautious because the things I have to ask and the detailed information I have to get from clients is so important, and it's so important to be able to communicate directly with them, to get that information properly, hear it and say it to them properly, that having a translator sometimes gets things lost. And there's an intimacy that comes when you're talking directly as opposed to having another person in the room with you. Imagine it's something very private, something you don't want to really talk about in public, you might be embarrassed about. Not only do you have to tell this translator and then me, it might cause a person not to fully disclose and reveal all the issues involved. But when you're one-on-one talking, it's much more helpful. Now, sometimes you can't find a lawyer that speaks your language and you need a translator, but look to see if you can find an attorney that doesn't require a translator, speaks your language. That's something I would recommend doing from my experience. As in my firm, I only handle cases where I can speak directly with my clients because rarely do I not do that and include a translator if it's really needed or if the case is really important that I handle it, because I really want to have that one-on-one intimate relationship with my clients. Now, once you've gone through these lists, you got together all the lawyers that are possible, you broke it down, you narrowed down to 3 to 5 people, ideally 5, you have to start scheduling your consultation. So you can do that by calling them usually, emailing them. They may have an option on their website for scheduling a consultation. So just go ahead and set it up. They may have a consultation fee, they may not have a consultation fee. So what's the deal with that? I would say if you're going to talk to 5 people, go talk to 3 people that have free consultations and talk to 2 that have paid consultations. Now, if someone does a free consultation, sometimes it means that they're just trying to get everyone to come in and just close that deal by just getting them in the door so it could close the sale. It's a hard sale. But not always. Some people just do free consultations because they want to be helpful that way. Now, my firm, I do have paid consultations, and the reason is, the way I look at it is, I really want to focus on you and what you need during that time without having to worry that I'm spending time that may not, give money or make income for my firm in the future. But by paying for that time, I'm really just focused on what's going on. And if I'm not hired in the future, that's fine too, because I know I'm giving my all, and I have a responsibility to you because you are paying me, and it's not just free advice that I'm giving out. So that's one reason I do it. But then again, some people that do paid consultations may not put the extra effort either. So it's kind of a mixed bag. That's why I say do some free consultations and do some paid ones, and compare these 5 people we were talking to, how differently they handle themselves. And I really think you could tell a difference many times. That's what my clients have told me. Also, I strongly recommend, and I make it mandatory for my own clients, that you see the attorney that you're going to talk with, and make sure they are an attorney as well, not their assistant, for example, talking with you. So in these kind of cases, especially right now where I'm recording this where COVID-19 is happening, it's not that you necessarily need to see it in person, but video options are possible. It's really important to just look each other in the eye so you can better relate and better communicate in that way. And as a lawyer, I really want to see my client because I could get to know them better and connect with them better. And they're not just a name, a number, or a voice over the phone. They're a human being. And by seeing you, it really helps me be a better attorney. So, help me by making that. A lot of people call me and say, we want to just do a phone consultation real quick. We don't have time for video, please. We don't feel like that. But they understand I'm going to be a better lawyer by seeing you because I'm going to look at you as a person and I'll have an emotional connection. So look at the lawyer so they know you're a human being. And so their heart really goes out to you to help you. Over the phone, it makes it just too disconnected and lacks that connection tie. So I strongly recommend doing video or in-person consultations so you see the person in one way or another. Now, what do you do during the consultation? So there's 2 things you got to do during the consultation. Judge the lawyer and ask the right questions. So let's start with the first one. What should the attorney be doing? They should be listening to you, asking good questions, listening to you, taking that information in, thinking about it, and providing guidance as the scenario, as the consultation is going through. You don't want a lawyer who just keeps talking and is not listening to you, because there's so many little nuanced details that we need to know in immigration to be able to give a good answer, that if the lawyer is not listening to you and asking good questions, they're probably missing something. Now, the attorney has to be polite, respectful, and fortunately sometimes that's not the case. And the attorney has to thoroughly explain to you the issues they have with the case, what the case is, what the process is, and if they could take the case at that time, what the charges are, and to break down the costs and responsibilities of the attorney and how the contract is going to look like. So they should spend a good amount of time talking about the responsibilities involved if they know what the work is going to entail. And one more note about that, be very cautious and careful of lawyers that give you guarantees. It is, first of all, illegal and impossible to give a guarantee in an immigration case. At the end of the day, it's a government officer, especially under the President Trump's administration, that's going to make a decision on your case. And so we never know how it's going to come out. And frequently, unfortunately, decisions come out completely wrong. Many times we need to sue the government for them to correct their error. Sometimes documents get lost in the system. Sometimes just bizarre things happen that create problems. There's no real way to guarantee a case. Now, a lawyer could tell you with confidence that this is a case that doesn't have issues as typical that they deal with, but they can't give that level of certainty that you need. So first of all, don't ask for it. And if an attorney does say it, be hesitant and probably not just hesitant, run away from that attorney. Now, on your part, what other things should you do? Don't be in a rush. Frequently, you have people that just want to get it done, just want to get to the point, just want to get to what the price is. But before we can know what the price is, we got to know what we need to do. Immigration has a lot of steps to it, and each case is so different. I have to listen to you in my cases and see what I need to do. So I can't just quote a price, because the work needed for your case might take 4 hours or might take 40 hours sometimes. So until I have an understanding of what's going on, it's very hard for me to say, oh, this is the price, and break it down. Even explain the price takes some time. Now, typically, immigration lawyers do flat rates. That means they hear out the case, and when they have an understanding of what you need, they quote you a flat rate. However, it's become more and more difficult to do that because of the way the laws change constantly under President Trump's administration. So what happens many times now, there's a flat rate for the basics of the case, but there's an opening that may switch the case to an hourly or a new flat rate depending on what issues erupt afterwards. Many times, I'll give you an example in a marriage case where a foreign spouse is living overseas. We start the case with USCIS, and we know what that's going to entail. Even though they've got more difficult and they create more work and more problems, we know that that initial part is going to entail. However, by the time the first part of the case is finished, and then we begin the second stage of the case, which could be 6 months or a year later, and deals with the U.S. Embassy abroad, all the rules may have changed, and new paperwork, new forms come out, and all of a sudden the work is doubled. So it's very hard to give a quote far in advance. So sometimes you have to say this is an estimate, and things could change. And that's why it's hard when you ask, just give me the exact number of how much the whole thing is. Things change so dramatically that it's very difficult to do that. And I try to just charge what we know we're going to do and deal with the rest as it comes. And so you got to be careful of these kind of situations and just be understanding of how the system works. And some lawyers just do a flat, do an hourly rate and say, okay, this is my hourly. They should give you an estimate of how much they think the thing will last and how long it will take. But again, it's very hard to estimate the future because things change so rapidly. And many times the government gives you such a hard time on things that it's hard to tell them, hard to know exactly how many hours it's going to take. Now, you also want to dig in deep with the attorney to see, is this something they've done? See what their strategy is, why they have that strategy. Ask them how they plan on communicating with you, who is going to be handling the case. I just said a lot of different important stuff, but you want to know, are you going to be handling as attorney? Are you going to be reviewing it? Is it going to be assistant or paralegal? And it's not necessarily something wrong with a paralegal or assistant doing it. It does even help bringing down the price, but some lawyers, handle the case on their own. That may be something that you want to do. And also communication is so important. How fast are attorneys going to respond? Are they going to disappear on you? And that's a big worry and annoyance that clients have. And you can really tell when you schedule a consultation afterwards until you sign the contract, how well are they at communicating? Do they answer the phones? Do they reply to their emails? And that can give you an example of how they're going to treat you down the line as well. So at this point, we had a consultation, it's done, a post-consultation time comes. Many times the lawyers, and I think they should, follow up with the email that goes over the things that they talk about. So we have in writing what the costs were, what was expected, what their plan or strategy are, and the information you need to make a decision on the case. Now, other times, the consultation itself led to more questions that you may not have the answers to, or the attorney needs to review your documents and you didn't have them with you. There's more complications. You may need to schedule a second consultation, or the attorney might request you to email them before they can make a final determination as to strategy, process, cost, and even if it's possible. So you got to have that leeway that you may have a consultation where you just don't have an answer because the situation is more complicated or more information was needed. But if they know what's involved, they should send you a retainer agreement or contract that really breaks down the scope of representation, the costs, the fees, what's expected, what's not expected, and all that kind of stuff. And you should read it. To be honest, I think very few of my clients actually read the retainer or contract agreement, but I strongly recommend you read it. And if you have questions, ask about it. Now, most lawyers will not change the agreement, but at least you can have clarification. And if you're not comfortable with what's in there, then you should not go forward with that attorney. So now we're nearing the end. Number 7, price. Price is the last thing they should talk about and ask. And as I mentioned in this process, it's one of the last ones that I discussed, because first you got to know whether something's even possible. And so a lot of times people call me and they just ask, how much is the cost? But I don't even know what's going on. It's like calling a doctor to say, how much is surgery? It's like, well, I don't know what kind of surgery that you need. So you really have to see if the attorney knows what they're doing, if there's a strategy there, if there's a process, and they break it down. Then obviously it's important, how much is the price, how much is it going to cost, and get to that kind of question. Now, you don't want to go to the cheapest person necessarily that seems like the lowest price, because that could just mean they're going to get your money and not have the time to even communicate or deal with you. But you don't necessarily want to go to the most expensive person too. The price itself doesn't always reflect how good the attorneys are. Some attorneys are great and they charge little. Some are awful, they charge a lot, and vice versa. They charge a lot because they're really great. It's really hard to tell based on price, but you want to just go with step number 8, the last step I have, with your gut instinct, how you feel. Talk with them, and since you talk to multiple people, you choose the one that you think you're most confident in the strategy and their bedside manner, how they communicate, and all those other factors, and make a decision based on that, as long as the price is within your range that's doable for you. But really base it on everything else but the price, and leave that last as maybe a differentiator when you're down to 2 people, because those other factors are the most important thing. At the end of the day, you want to be successful in what you do. You want to be able to get the green card, the work permit, the status, not be deported. And that's the number one thing you should be worried about and thinking about, and then deciding how the rest is going to work out. because if you're just deciding on price, you're not deciding on the best solution, best strategy for your case. I hope that information helped. That is, I think, the best way to go about choosing an immigration lawyer. It's a long, drawn-out process. It is a lot of work on your part, but if you want the best result, that's what you needed to. If you needed to contact my office, please email me at info@jqqlaw.com. My name is John Khosravi, managing attorney of the JQK Immigration Law Firm, and I help people from across the world and across America gain the immigration benefits that they need. Thank you so much for listening.